All right, peace and much love. Zin Uru here. Welcome to the latest installment of Message from the Minista. And this week's message from the Minista is God's presence. God's presence. I want to welcome y'all here. Last week we did the podcast with Eddie G. We did the interview with Eddie G. and we got the knowledge. And, we acknowledged everybody out here, but just want to thank y'all for being here. A lot more people showed up last week. And what's wonderful about this space that we're in is that there is no capacity, right? Because we're talking about the infinite, everlasting, ever-presence of great spirit. We are talking about the creator of all that is. We are talking about God. And so in spirit, we know that there's no such thing as time and space. That time and space are something that we experience, but spirit contains time and space. And therefore, as the audience grew last week, so did the container, so did the space, so to speak. And what a great time that was, right? What a great week this has been. I've been thinking a lot this week, like, what do I want to talk about? There's just so many things that were learned through this little journey. Actually, really the journey of the past couple weeks. But the one that kept sticking to me is the ever-present nature of God. And God always here, always with us. Even if somebody doesn't even believe in God, doesn't even perceive in God, says, I am an atheist, which is atheist. I am an atheist. I denounce and don't believe in any of that. I'm a pure scientist, I say. Even they are contained by God. They are sustained by the very breath of God itself. So this week when I'm talking about God's presence, I want to bring it down to a more personal level, for a more experienced level, that we can experience God's actual presence in our day-to-day life more and more. And I think it's important that we realize this. I'm going to do some readings this week. I think it's important that we realize God's presence, because this is like the key to everything else in life. You can go out and do anything in life, but until you feel God's presence everywhere, you'll still be seeking and looking and searching. And most people don't even know that that's what they're searching for. But I want to say this week, and I feel it's very important, is that, one thing that I've discovered, and I don't even know where it was picked up in my life, and you all probably, we resonate on the same, or you wouldn't even be watching Message from the Minista, is I honestly don't remember when God's presence actually entered my life, or when I should more accurately say I became more aware, or became aware of God's presence. And I say this because, when I was young, when I was born, literally born, I had this sickness. It was called Pylorus Stegnosis, and it's a long name, but basically what it is there's a valve in our stomach, right? And that valve was shut. It wasn't fully expanded, and therefore I wasn't able to get my mother's nutrients down from the milk. I had an early form of acid reflux, but what it was the milk wasn't penetrating all the way through the abdomen and digesting the way it's supposed to. So 5 weeks old, I was just skinny, and I was only getting, what nutrients I was absorbing, but I was losing weight. And so, my mom, my grandfather is a pastor, everybody was praying over me, praying for me, please save this child. We will walk in your light, oh God. And, my mom did, and my grandfather did as well. So they kept their word, and they are still, do. But I went under, I almost died. I had a near-death experience, just out of the womb. I crossed over, so to speak. And I never really thought about it my whole life, but I'd always have these mystical experiences. And I just considered that being aware at such a young age, going through the near-death experience where before I even formed English or language, I was just purely in spirit in that time and space. So for me to be here, through having the surgery, I call it's like my companion, right? I got this big scar on my stomach, the scar was only little, but it grew with me. It's about 6 inches, scar right here on my stomach. I call it my companion because it's always a constant reminder to me of how close we are and how, in one way, fragile this body is, but in another way, like how durable this body is. And that's the yin and yang of life, right? It's like we're fragile and we're durable at the same time. And so when we feel kind of fragile in life, we tend to call on God's help more. And when we're being more durable in life, we call on God's help more too, because things are hitting us and they're bouncing off us, but we're like, yo. So to feel God's presence, I don't even remember when it started because it's eternal. Were there times where I felt like more distance from God? Yeah. Were there times where I felt more close to God? Yeah. But the situations that, we find ourselves in our day-to-day living, in our day-to-day life, how often do we find ourselves calling on God because we've allowed some kind of a distance to take place? We get complacent. We walk along life and we're not giving even the littlest bit of gratitude. Thank you, God, for the breath of life. Thank you, God, for the sunshine today. Thank you, God, from the gratitude of my heart for this gift of life. When's the last time you thank God for the gift of life or for your breath or for the water or for the sun? Now, what's dope is I feel a lot of you I just did it 5 minutes before this started. I just did that this morning. And you know what? That's a good feeling, right? Why? Because our collective is feeling that gratitude. Our collective is sharing in that gratitude, right? And that gratitude creates a spirit amongst the collective consciousness that we experience as hip-hoppers. And it creates and it becomes like this light of our world. But that experience, that presence, that light, that's God. That's God. Like God is the experience and the experiencer itself. So when we're feeling that gratitude, what are we feeling? We're feeling God. And I've noticed in my own life, like when I'm going through trial and tribulation and just like last week in the physical world, but I'm talking more in the spiritual world, like I'm off the path. I'm wandering what I think is through the depths of consciousness. And I'm wondering, is there even a God? Well, why is evil existing in the world? Why is there so much darkness and suffering? Why? How did we even get here in this space? And in those questioning moments, it almost seems like I'm off the path, only to discover when it's its time, when God's timing, God's perfect timing, all of a sudden, boom, the enlightenment comes and the light turns on, and all of a sudden, all the so-called darkness, which is another form of light in and of itself, the so-called darkness is dispelled, and like these lights that are shining on me right now, it is seen. And in our spiritual life, we go through that same thing. That light comes on, and sometimes it's just for a brief moment. Sometimes we see the room, we turn it off, whatever it is. But when that light comes on and all those questions have this answer, it's not like the answer comes in whatever language we're speaking. It doesn't just come in English or Spanish or even hip hop. It just comes as a feeling. It comes as a consciousness. It comes as a tone or a sound. And then there's this awareness. And once we have that awareness, that aha moment, all of a sudden, everything else that makes sense, and it could be months just leading up to that, hours, days, whatever that time frame is, leading up to that moment of awareness. And when that moment of awareness is felt, what are we feeling? We're feeling God. But notice this, That other feeling that's driving us, that we're like, yo, I'm seeking this awareness. What is this? That's God too. That so-called darkness, that's God too. There's no avoiding it. Nobody escapes it. None of this comes with us when we leave. But who we are, this idea, who we are, how we experience God's presence, God's actual presence is with us when we leave this body. And what a joy it must be for those who, when they left this body, were already aware of God's awareness all around them, God's presence all around them. That when they left, they were just already walking with the Creator. And I feel that just anybody, no matter what path they've walked on life, to some degree or other, feels that at their moment of banga, of leaving this earth, leaving this body, the breath, the final out breath. But yo, while we're here in this space, like God's presence is everywhere. And what's really interesting is the more we're aware of God's presence, the more supernatural experiences we have. And God's presence sometimes will really get our attention, right? Like, I'll give you a simple example one time. I want to say it was me, Save One, Stat, and Ambitious One. And we were getting ready to do a hip-hop appreciation week out in Denver, Colorado. And yo, like Stat's driving, right? And he's driving, and there's just some rain because there's always like bipolar weather up there in Colorado, Denver specifically. But there was some rain, and the car in front of us stopped really suddenly, and Stat hit on the brakes. Reaction time was fine, but the car kept skidding on the road. And at the very last minute, it just goes, and our car, the nose just turned just enough to like miss the car in front of us. We didn't hit it. But at that moment, I saw a kneecap of an ancestor go boonk, and literally just slide the car over. And I was like, yo, I just saw this giant knee. That's God's presence right there. Now, I saw it interpreted as a knee. It might have been a quick flash in Stat's hands, or a whole motion of brakes and turning that just shifted the car that way. It may have been the water, the way the water hit and that dip in the curve that happened over there, that broke the asphalt over there and just made the tire move that way. It could have been all of those things at once, right? Who are we to limit God? Excuse me. Who are any of us to limit God? And who are any of us to limit another's perception of God? Now, people can be mistaken. People make mistakes about what they perceive of as God, but it is God still. Now, people will look and be like getting a test from the universe, and the universe is saying, you need to say no to this, but the person is saying, I need to say yes to this. And we've been there. I've been there. I know that. And so I'm getting this message, I'm like, God's saying, you need to say no this time. And I'm saying, I want to say yes this time. And so it's God. God's the temptation, in that way. And I say yes. And then I got to experience why I should have said no. That's what happens to all of us. Or I say no, and then I get to experience what it means to be in alignment with God. But either way, the lesson is there. The presence of God is right there, teaching us all the time. Where is those ideas in your head coming from? Do you really think you're generating every original idea or every inspiration, I should say, that you're feeling? Do you think that's you who's generating your inspiration? Maybe. Maybe it's the television. But maybe, just maybe, those deep inspirations, that's the voice of God speaking through you. You get this feeling inside, and you just got to follow it. And you may not even know why at first, but you're like, yo, something's calling me in this direction. Something's bringing me over there. And yo, let me tell you something, my nobility. It is detailed. It's down to the macrocosm. And the more detailed we get, it's amazing. It's amazing. The reason I wanted to bring this up this week, is because I don't know if you've all noticed, but since 2019, the world has changed. The world has changed a lot. And what I mean by that is the way people interact with one another has completely changed. You know, one of the lessons, out of the many lessons last week of getting lost in the forest, in the inner city forest, getting lost on the trails, not really lost, but not knowing exactly where we were at, thinking the car was stolen, only to find out that we just parked way far away in a whole other park, and we had walked so far in such a short amount of time that we were across town in another park. In the dark, it looked like the other park, so we thought, well, the police told us the car would have been towed if it was there after hours in all the parks. So we thought it had been towed, and the cops were saying, yo, it probably was stolen if it's not showing up. So, you know, the car was found. The car was eventually found. For those who don't follow me on Facebook or Instagram, we found the car. The cops found the car right where we parked it. I'll talk more about that later. Well, I'll talk about that now. So last week we thought the car was stolen. We filed the report and just kind of chilling and waiting it out. And then get a call Monday night that they found the car. And so I went out there Monday night to pick up the car. And it was, so this is the part I wanted to say about God's presence, right? Had that car been towed like they were supposed to do, the fee would have been between $250 and $300. The officer who finally called the car in, found out what was going on, got a hold of me, waited for me to come out and look at it. Then I had to come back, take an Uber out there to pick it up. All of that, he watched my car from about 2.5 to 3 hours, right? I had a police escort watching my car to make sure it was safe. I didn't pay the $250 to $300 of the impound fee. No, as a matter of fact, I had my car watched. That's the presence of God. That's the presence of God keeping an eye on the car. That's real. That's real. Like, there's no other way to interpret that. You tell me. You tell yourself, what is that? So the car was found, but, you know, and grateful to God for looking out for the car, for us, for the whole thing. Like, but there was never a moment of doubt when it was lost. I didn't feel no way. If the car was stolen, I had no negative feeling, no sad or no fear. We called the insurance company. The insurance company told me, like, yo, like, theft's not covered under your insurance. And I was like, yo, man, okay, word, okay. So that just means that I just had a loss, but there's no loss because we don't lose anything in the universe. Like, God, what is loss? What is loss? When we leave this body, we take none of it with us. So what can we actually lose? Nothing. So last week, we're walking, Eddie G and I, and you know, this is 2-3 hours into it. We're trying to find out where our car is. I'm just like, let's start asking for rides. And me and Eddie, we just started asking people for rides, you know. Eddie's speaking Spanish to the Spanish speakers. I'm speaking white boy to the whites. I'm just like, we're asking people for help, and nobody's helping us. And both of us are like, yo, this is interesting because we don't really find ourselves in this situation where it's this hard to find somebody to help. I mean, we must have gotten denied like 10 to 15 times. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 times. 12 times. 12 times people said, no, we cannot help you. No, we can't help you. We appreciate you, but we can't help you. Walk a little faster. I was like, yo, man, I mean, this is an interesting scenario to be in, because I've had it where I just, wait, and I've given plenty of examples on here, and it just shows up. And if I need to ask for help, if we got to ask for help, we find somebody to help us. But 12 people said no? That wouldn't have happened pre-2020. That wasn't happening back in 2019. No matter what the scenario or circumstance is. But what I noticed in people's eyes was a level of fear that was imaginary. Just imaginary. And it wasn't until older black gentleman in his, 60s, strong dude, picked this. We just asked his family, yo, hey, have you guys seen the entrance to this spot? They said, oh, it's up over there. You might want to check that parking lot over there. So we started walking out. He said, yo, let me help you. Would you guys need a ride? Jumped in the back of his car. He gave us a ride. We didn't find the car, but just goes to show you that, he saw that we were no danger, and he heard. And, I told him, I said, yo, you got to be an angel tonight. Now, we told him we appreciate it. And, we also let him know that Eddie G and I are the angels in other people's lives. When other people need help, we're the first ones to help. But it doesn't really matter how everybody was treating us. It didn't really matter that 12 people denied. Because God's presence was there the whole time. We felt God's presence. We were breathing in God's presence. We were walking in God's presence. And therefore, it was perfect. Exactly the way it happened is how it should have happened. But peep the world that we're living in, my nobility. Just for a moment, sit back and really be honest and really embrace the changes that have taken place, and quit waiting for it to go back to whatever that used to be, because that wasn't even working in the first place. But really see how they've conditioned society to be so afraid of invisible this and invisible that and one another, based on skin tone, based on race, based on politics, based on beliefs, based on religion, based on what burger you eat, how you eat, when you eat, where you eat, why you eat, what you eat. Like the insanity of the judgment that they're telling us to judge one another with. Where is God's presence in their system? Besides God just acting as the container that holds it, that holds the illusion that God is telling us to say no to. Say no to the illusion and yes to God's actual presence in our life. Survival is going to depend on it, my nobility, for real. With God's presence, you don't get down. You don't feel defeated. You get prepared. You see clearly. You watch the signs. And eventually, when it's God's time, the light comes. It shines itself. Let's take a reading right now. We want to talk about, because, God's presence. I want to talk about the words presence and the word present. One of the acronyms we use for hip hop is wholly integrated people having an omnipresent power. Wholly integrated people having an omnipresent power. Omnipresent, omni being all, the wholeness. Everywhere at once, omni. God's omnipresent, everywhere, at once, always, every moment of every life, every so-called death, every sleep, every wake, every enlightenment, everywhere. Omnipresent. We want to see what the word present means, what it means to be in the present, in the now, in this experience, and also talk about presence itself, what it means to feel and have that presence. There's a couple readings too. I want to read from The Game of Life and How to Play It, and also read from the Gospel of Hip Hop. I really want to set that table this week on kind of a deeper, more serious note than even the last few messages from the ministers, because for real, that experience last week just showed me a number of things, but being prepared ahead of time, knowing where you're at, looking at the map, having a plan, especially in unfamiliar territory. I took for granted that we're just going to be on trails out in the middle of an urban area, not realizing and even knowing ahead of time there was 640 acres of wilderness and crisscrossing trails and connected to other parks across town with little other trails that interconnect with one another. Like, I didn't have my own knowledge up going into that situation. I just assumed something that wasn't the way it was. But that was the great lesson in and of itself. Don't go in assuming that we know the arena we're walking into when we've never been there before. Get your knowledge up, my nobility, especially as a spirit being. You're entering into this garden that we call Earth. And if you haven't really been to this part of it called 2022, if you haven't been to this time and space, this other part of the park, this arena called 2022, you're going to want to look at the map, meditation, affirmation, prayer. You're going to want to look at where you're at. You're going to want to look at the chessboard and see where the pieces are aligned and see what it is that you're actually looking at in your life as you proceed. Because while you walk, and you want to walk in God's presence, but also part of God's presence is preparation. And part of that preparation is we get out of our own way and we don't assume things. We double check ourselves. We have that discipline to look at the map, look at where we're at, and make more of a concentrated plan than I did that last week, And it was perfect the way it was because God needed me to wander. God needed us to wander and do that. However, it also was the lesson to that can't happen again as far as I'm concerned. I know Eddie feels the same way because he was saying, put me out in the forest. I got my compass. I know how to get everything. But we were on the trails and we didn't even, and he knew that too as a trail guide who goes out in the wilderness and does that. It was like, man, this is the trip, man. So we got to pay attention to our surroundings and our environment and know the terrain that we're about to enter into. Let's put these up here on the screen. Let's put the word present up first, and then we're going to look at presence. I'm kind of go through these kind of quick because they're pretty basic, and I think we have an understanding of what present means. A moment or period in time, perceptible as intermediate between past and future, now. Now, I like this because I started with the metaphysical meaning of what it means to be present, the present moment, a moment or period in time, perceptible as intermediate between past and future, now, which is amazing because we're always in what Prince called the everlasting now, what we call in hip-hop omnipresent. It's always here. We're always in the so-called now. We're always in this wholeness. And the past, the present, and the future all exist right here in this presence. When we have our presence in the present, we realize that the past and future are with us now as well. Definition number 2A, the present tense. Definition number 2B, a verb form in the present tense. 3, presents law, the document or instrument in question. I mean, look at this. This is a very, very malleable word. It moves. This word has a movement in it. Existing or happening now, current. And look at current too. Let's talk about current. Current is a stream. It's a movement. A current is a stream of water. The undercurrent in the ocean is the current underneath the current. The waves coming in and out, that's the tide, that's the current. So look at the present like that as it's moving in and out. It's a current that's flowing. Definition number 2A here, being at hand or in attendance. Yeah, I'm present here. We are present. You are present wherever you are at right now. Existing in something specified. Oxygen is present in the bloodstream. Now being considered actually here or involved. So that's just wherever you're at and being involved in that moment. I like that version of present means there's an involvement in the moment. That's an awareness in the moment. Designated in a verb tense or form that expresses current time, readily available, immediate, 6, alert to circumstances, attentive. I like that one a lot. Alert to circumstances, being attentive. That's being aware of our outer environment. That's being aware of the moment. This is all spiritual sight here. At the present time is right now, for the present, for the time being. Present participle. Old French from Latin, presenus, present, present participle, or prese, to be present, pre, esse, to be. Look at that. The root of present is to be. To be. To be present simply means to be. It's interesting how when we go back and we look at the root word, and it goes back as far, and this of course is the American Heritage Dictionary 3rd edition. If we really could go deeper and grab the Oxford English, it's a whole, like it's deep. But when we go back to the original intention of the word present, it is to be. Now we bring up here presence. Now God's presence is the name of this. And God's presence is really us being present with God, because God's everywhere all the time. It's omnipresent is God. God's omnipresent power. God's omnipresent presence here with us all the time. It's up to us to be present with God's presence. Presence, a noun, the state or fact of being present. The state or fact of being present. Current existence or occurrence. Immediate proximity in time or space. Woo! Your presence is here right now across all time and space. My nobility, our presence is here right now in this time and space. Immediate proximity in time or space. That's why we're always present. Where? In spirit. Definition number 3, the area immediately surrounding a great personage, especially a sovereign. Oh, the presence. I had the honor of being in the presence of Amachi. I'll put her a picture up here real quick. Amachi gives hugs. She has hundreds of thousands of devotees all over the world. She's a mystic. And she raises a lot of money for people after, floods have hit India, or hurricanes or tornadoes or storms, to help rebuild villages. Like her going around giving hugs and walking in her faith raises enough energy that people can call it money, but it's an energy that can fix and rebuild entire villages based on her spiritual principles of walking around and healing and empowering and giving her dharma through hugs. And there was, a few thousand people in this building, a huge conference center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And there was an excitement about before she entered into the room. And when she finally walked in, her presence was felt. It's like as soon as the door opened and you see her, there's like this moment, everybody draws their breath in, and her presence is felt. And you can feel the energy of this being. So with this one, the area immediately surrounding a great personage, especially a sovereign, you felt her presence right before she walked in the room. And then when she walked in the room, even though I was, 40 feet away from her, I could still feel her presence. Everyone could. Definition number 4, a person who is present. You're all present here. In the presence. A person's bearing, especially when it commands respectful attention. Like when the teacher grabs the mic, that presence, when he grabs the microphone, is like, yo, check 1, 2. Is this thing on? And the way the audience they hear his voice, just go check 1, 2. And they go, and everybody starts making noise and yelling and screaming and clapping and woo, and making every kind of noise in the world because the presence is heard. And he usually does that mic check, before he even jumps up on stage. He lets him hear his voice too first. 1, 1, 1, check. Is this thing on? Everybody knows his voice, and his presence is then just broadcast everywhere. And it creates, it commands respectful attention. People, you have to, when he's on stage, you have to watch. It's like all eyes. See, synonymous with bearing, interesting. The quality of self-assurance and effectiveness that permits a performer to achieve a rapport with the audience. Stage presence. I just talked about that with the teacher. All the great ones. Michael Jackson, Prince. I could just go on and on about, the stage presence. There's artists who have a stage presence. I'm told I have a stage presence. When I'm up on stage, I have a presence about me. Number 6, a supernatural influence felt to be nearby. I feel the presence of God. I feel the presence of my ancestors. I feel the presence of an angel. I feel the presence of a miracle. I feel the presence of light. I feel the presence of truth. I feel the presence of freedom. Definition number 7, the diplomatic, political, or military influence of a nation in a foreign country, especially as evidenced by the positioning of its diplomats or its troops there. That's colonization right there. Saved it for the last. Presence of mind, the ability to think and act calmly and efficiently, especially in emergency. That presence of mind, that was last week, our ability to think and act calmly and efficiently, especially in an emergency. It wasn't really an emergency, but it was, We couldn't find the car. We were walking around, but we had, mental presence. We were just present in our mind. We were present with God. So it was a state of being, of just walking and knowing that, God is with us and God's got our back. And God's got your back and God's walking with you. But do you see it? Do you know it? Do you feel it? And most of all, are you present with it? To be. To be present is to be. So simply just existing, self-acceptance. I'm going to exist where I'm at right here and right now. Let me just be me and accept me for who I am in this moment. Mistakes and victories, defeats and victories, love and anger, all of it that I am, all of it I am. Let me just accept all of it, who I am, where I am right now in this moment, so I can get a clear look at where I am and just feel my own presence in the presence of God. Let me be present with myself in the presence of God. Therefore, I am present with God. Now we can start getting something done, because it doesn't matter where you're at. It ain't where you're from, it's where you're at, right? Rakim said that. But it ain't even really, it ain't where you're at. Because where you're at, once you just accept it, then you're going to know where you're going to be. That's how we know where we're going to be, when we accept where we're at. And I mean, accept where we're at with the truth. Accept where we're at with the truth, then we can move forward. Then we can say, okay, this is what I need to strengthen. This is what I need to keep doing. This is what I need to stop doing. And then we just keep moving forward. In the presence of God, everywhere, right in here, breathing in and out. This breath of God is the most magnificent present in the presence we could ever experience. A lot of people go through some dark days, but they're still here. They're still here. Why are they still here? There's a reason. Life wants to continue. Life has this urging, right? That's the hop. The hip is the knowing, the being. Hip is the awareness. Hip is the presence. But that hop, that's that urging. That's that forward. That's what wants to just keep breathing in and out. That's that movement. And when we start being hip to our hop, we're present with hip hop. We're present with God. We're present with ourselves. We're present with the truth. And once again, what's wonderful about it is this. It just keeps unfolding. The mystery just keeps revealing itself. on deeper levels, on higher levels, on something you missed levels, you know? So it's not like, oh, ha, ha, now I am all-knowing, being, seeing, and I don't even need to experience. Nope, you're going to keep experiencing. Each moment of enlightenment brings this new sight, new vision, and then there's more to explore. There's more vision to see. Why? Because it's infinite. We're dealing with infinity here. So we're dealing with an infinite experience here. But in that infinite experience, what's constant? God's presence. God's presence is constant through it all. Through every lifetime, through we're corporal, through we're not in the body, when we're just the spirit floating around, whatever it is, God's present there. While we're coming through the birth canal, God's present. While we're in the womb, God's present. While we're being conceived, God is present at conception. When the spark of life and the breath of life, the spark of life of the sperm enters into the egg, God is there, creates an electrical charge, and life itself is born in that moment. And when I say life itself, like the container, a human body that can house the breath of God, requires a man and a woman, a sperm and an egg. At that very moment, God is created. The vehicle for God is created at that moment. The idea, the spark of God enters into the body of the woman. And what's the first thing that is formed? The heartbeat. The heartbeat is the first thing that is formed. And what's the second? Is the tip of the tongue pops out of that little heart. And the rest of the body is born. And why is it called the living word then? Where does the living word come from? It comes from the heart. And what does it mean to be present? It means that we're in our heart space, not just our mind space. We remain in our heart space. Oh, the mind is very important. I'm not, everybody say, follow your heart, follow your heart. Your heart will be just like, get you into some, like, follow the being, follow God, follow wisdom, follow understanding, follow knowledge. Like, people just say, follow your heart, like, just so haphazardly, I say follow your heart symbolically, but I mean, keep your mind, keep the mind going while you're following your heart. The mind is there for a reason. The brain itself is there for a reason. Thinking and intelligence is there for a reason. So the heart's beating and moving, the hop, but use the mind, the hip, to help navigate that hop. Use the hip to help navigate the hop. Hip-hopper. Speaking of that, let's read from the Gospel of Hip-Hop. I always want to, just got a few paragraphs here. We'll jump up on the screen. This is in the fourth overstanding, the H law. You can turn to page 238. We're going to just read 10 short paragraphs here, 18 through 28. And I'm kind of working backwards on purpose because I want to give the deeper meaning of what we're about to read from the game of life and how to play it, because it's going to offer some very interesting insights in the game of life. But let's start with this Gospel of Hip Hop in the awareness section. And of course, the Gospel of Hip Hop is written by the teacher, KRS-One, presented to the Temple of Hip Hop. And I, Zin Uru, am a recognized intellectual and spiritual contributor to the Gospel of Hip Hop. It's page 824, I believe. My name is actually in there, so they will never be disputed. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I, Zin Uru, am a recognized intellectual and spiritual contributor to the Gospel of Hip Hop. With more and more awareness, you should be able to do and see more and more into the true nature of your reality. This is presence, my nobility. This is being. Being is an awareness. Being is your presence. You are doing what is happening to you. The observer affects the observed. We only see what we want to see. So if you want to see God, you're going to see God. Therefore, if at the subatomic quantum level of reality, the observer and the thing observed are really two aspects of the same event, it is accurate to teach that life is what you make of it, and that you truly get what you expect, that it truly is all in your mind, God willing. At the quantum level, Two supposedly separate things, like an observer and an atom, seem to affect each other in such a way that if the observer looks at an atom, it is a particle in a fixed position in space. Yet, if the same observer is not looking at the atom, it remains a wave in superposition in space, meaning that it is everywhere at once until we look at it again. Now pay attention here, my nobility, because what we're showing here, we're going to be reading the mindset when we read from the Game of Life and how to play it. But this is the metaphysics of what's happening we're about to read. So you're getting to see the deeper lesson. So use this sight here. Our true being seems to exist in a unified field of infinite possibilities that we call God. Everything seems to be going on at the subatomic level at the same time in the same space until we choose one outcome by denying all others. It is perception that creates reality. It seems that physical matter is both particles and waves at the same time, meaning that there are physical as well as non-physical existences to everything our senses can detect. Even we are physical/non-physical beings. Actually, the body is the mind in particle form, and the mind is the body in wave form. Read that again. The body is the mind in particle form, and the mind is the body in wave form. Know thyself, my nobility. How huge are you? You are a wave of creation. To be current, to live in the current moment, you are that wave. You are the currency. You are the currency of God. You are the living water of God. We all are. For those with eyes to see and ears to hear, and to be in the consciousness of being. The truth of the matter is that physical reality and the observer of physical reality are two aspects of the same unified field event. The observer affects what the observer sees. We basically see what we want and need to see. This goes for our other four senses as well. We are telling physical matter through our sense perception what we want it to smell, feel, taste, sound, and look like based upon what we have decided over many years shall be real for us. In essence, everyone affects the reality they see, hear, touch, smell, and taste. There's no victimhood here, my nobility. Yeah, you might be a victim of theft, you might be a victim of somebody lying to you, but when it comes to your life, you are not a victim. You are an observer of your life and a participant in your life. Your life looks the way it does because you made the decision to, whether it was on purpose or not on purpose, you still made the decisions. Whether they were good decisions or bad decisions, you still made the decision. I still made the decision. We still made the decision. The physical world is a potential until we choose it to be what we desire. Space is the substance/environment that helps us to see separate things. It blocks reality so that we can get specific things done. At this level of understanding, we are the universe itself, focused upon who we are, it is, and where we are right now. Meditate upon this paragraph before going further. It's always interesting when we read the meditate on this paragraph before going further, because that becomes the homework. Just this paragraph right here is the homework. Put it where you can read it this week. Just read this paragraph 10 times this week. 2 times a day for the next 5 days. When you wake up and when you go to bed. You really want to get the deeper meaning of this? Try that. Read this paragraph right before you go to bed and right when you wake up for the next 7 days. Let's do it for 7 days. Okay? The physical world is a potential. Screenshot it if you need to. The physical world is a potential until we choose it to be what we desire. Space is a substance/environment that helps us to see separate things. It blocks reality so that we can get specific things done. At this level of understanding, We are the universe itself, focused upon who we are, it is, and where we are right now. Paragraph 25. As spirit human beings, the universe is seeing what it is capable of as us. This is the presence, my nobility. As spirit human beings, the universe is seeing what it is capable of as us. The universe is seeing what it is capable of as you. What are you capable of? Well, the universe wants to know what it is capable of through you. Capable, able. There's our dude Abel again. What are you able to do? What can God do through you? This is what that movie Limitless. Don't take a pill or nothing. But this is the overstanding. This is the metaphysics of it. You become limitless. Why would does God limit you? God may keep you from things, but you have access to the limitless presence of God. Then you have a limitless sight. We have a limitless sight that we can tune into. God will protect us for our own good. But use it. Put it to use. As spirit/human beings, the universe is seeing what it is capable of as us. To know that you are not in the universe, but that you are the universe itself is self-awareness. To know that you are an idea, a possibility, a hope, a tryout in God's mind, this is self-awareness. To know that God is depending upon you to fulfill the purpose designed for you is self-awareness. Look at that. Know this. Know that God is depending upon you to fulfill the purpose designed for you. That's your self-awareness. God has a purpose for you that only you can fulfill. Nobody else but you. To create yourself is self-awareness. For when you create yourself, you know yourself. This is know thyself, they say. Well, you have to create yourself to know yourself. And when you know yourself, you know God. Not that you are God, but that you are God's. You belong to the very fabric of the spiritual realm itself. Your intention is your answer to God's purpose for your existence. Your intention is what affects the very fabric of your space-time reality. Read that part again. Your intention is your answer to God's purpose for your existence. And listen to this. Don't be in denial of this. Your intention is what affects the very fabric of your space-time reality. Not just your words, not just our thoughts. Our intention is what affects the very fabric of space-time reality. It is not about your words so much as it is about the intention behind your words. The emotion you put into your statements, the feelings and graphic mental pictures that occur simultaneously in the mind while speaking, the moaning and groaning of one's being. These are what the universe listens to and responds to. Therefore, by believing in ourselves as attuned hip-hoppers with special abilities to complete our tasks in this reality, we command the fabric of life itself toward the aim of our desires. Again, everyone affects the reality they see and experience. So what do you see and experience? Everyone affects the reality they experience. So what do you see and experience? Be in the presence of God. What are you going to see and experience being in the presence of God? You say, I am hip hop in the presence of God. What? Does your imagination wake up? Oh yeah, because I'll tell you what. God comes in and the imagination is opened up, and all of a sudden you start having these ideas and these inspirations, and you change your name, or you reinforce and re-empower the name you already have, and all of a sudden you just start saying, yo, man, I see myself as this, and I can do this, and then the self-creation, and then that self-creation, we know ourselves within that. And you are a unique signature, a unique time-space signature, name, sound, vibrational wave, frequency, currency of God. You are that which you are. You are the being. You are present with the being of God right here, right now, in this time and space. Wherever you're at, it's the same time and space that I'm experiencing. And we're both experiencing the ever-presence of God right now. Isn't it wonderful? I mean, isn't it wonderful? Oh, but you know what, Zin? Sometimes it don't always feel that wonderful. Why? Because God's presence will correct us. People don't want to talk about sin, but when we look at the metaphysical nature of sin, overstepping one's bounds, selfish, inconsiderate needs, bad habits, bad physics, then we can start saying, you know what, God, I need to make some changes in my life, like for real. Because God's there shining the light on you, and God's going to be like, you're really angry, and it's hard for me to vibrate and show you who you are through all that anger. And you can say, God, it's hard for me to see you through all this anger. Can you help me with my anger, God? I cast the burden of anger upon the Christ within as I go forward in peace. You start making those affirmations up to let that anger go and be willing to let it go. The wonderful thing about God is we don't even have to know how to do certain things. We just have to be willing to do certain things. We don't have to know how to forgive somebody, but we can be willing to forgive somebody, and God will show us how to forgive that person. It's the willing, God, I'm willing to listen. God, I'm willing to learn. God, I'm willing to be corrected. That's the intention of the heart, and that's what God's listening to, is our intention, and our entire reality outside of us is based on our intention. It's the intention behind the word. It's the intention behind the thought. It's the intention behind the feeling. It's the intention that matters. We hear people all the time say things that they don't even mean. But because we've been domesticated by the school system to believe the words that come out of people's mouths and not to listen to intention, we're told that intention is like make-believe or doesn't exist, that only the word itself exists, the actual symbol of the word. So we get conditioned as kids to listen to liars. They lie to us about history, about Christopher Columbus. They just lie to us about Christopher Columbus. I don't know if they still do in schools, but when I was growing up, they were just making lies up, just lying to us. And on some level, they knew they were lying, but we weren't supposed to listen to the intention of the teacher. We were just supposed to listen to the words of the textbook and repeat it back and make that our reality and make that a fact, when in truth, it was all a lie and an illusion. So when you get rid of that lie and illusion of the domesticated, colonized little mind, then we open up to the big mind, the great event. We open up to God's ever-presence in our reality. And when we open up to God's ever-presence in our reality, we start thinking about life beyond just us. We start thinking and wanting to live for something bigger than us. And that's why I love hip-hop the way I do, because our purpose, know this, if you really, really, really want to know your purpose is bigger than you. It's not about what you can accomplish. It's bigger. So we say, my purpose is to further develop and preserve hip-hop culture. Well, that's something bigger than any of us as individuals. But no, I look at hip-hop, I'm like, it's a bigger idea. Hip-hop is bigger than me, even though I'm self-contained and I'm fully hip-hop and I am hip-hop. I'm experiencing God's ever-presence, but God is way bigger than my understanding and presence, because we're all feeling it. God's breathing through us all, thinking through us all right now. And when we join something bigger than ourselves, that's what real purpose is. That's where supernatural experiences happen, and supernatural, I'd say, powers are gained, but it's our being. We just open up to our supernatural being, and we start noticing like superpowers, Not like flying and all of that, or the punch through brick walls or anything like that. Although those Shaolin, they could punch through a brick wall. It's pretty impressive. But no, the superpowers of like health, love, awareness, wealth, peace, prosperity, like forgiveness is a superpower. Gratitude is a superpower. Peace is a superpower. Peace man. You know, people want to be Spider-Man or Batman. I'm Peace man. You know, what is your superpower? Are you calm in the storm? Are you focused when others are losing their mind? Are you the peace? Can you represent God in the situation? Because God's ever present, but they may not be tuned into God. But you know what helps tune into God? Your vibrational frequency will help others tune into God too. And they may not want to give you a ride because they might be afraid of God. All right? You may not get a ride because somebody might be afraid of the God force in you. Think about that one. Let's read from, I got this book called The Wisdom of Florence Scovel Shinn. The Wisdom of Florence Scovel Shinn. We've read from her book, This Contains the Game of Life and How to Play It. I'm going to read from a part of that book. Great. One of my favorite metaphysicians. Just her books are amazing, and I always suggest that people pick up The Game of Life and How to Play It. Teacher gave me a copy of that many years ago, all the way back in 2005. He gave me a cassette, and I burned it to CD, and he loaned me a cassette, and I burned it to CD, and I would just put it to MP3 and stuff as, time went on, and just would listen to it all the time. But I'll put it up here on the screen. This section right here, this little chapter here, is called Perfect Self-Expression, or the Divine Design. And my nobility, remember what we were saying earlier. Reading from the Gospel of Hip Hop, really talking about the metaphysics of what was happening. This is a state of mind. This is a state of being to get into. This is to really feel the presence of God right now. Because what are we all searching for? What are we wanting to do? It's perfect self-expression, or the divine design. Look at this quote here. No wind can drive my bark astray, nor change the tide of destiny. There is for each man perfect self-expression. There is a place which he is to fill, and no one else can fill. Something which he is to do, which no one else can do. It is his destiny. This achievement is held, a perfect idea in divine mind, awaiting man's recognition. As the imagining faculty is the creative faculty, it is necessary for man to see the idea before it can manifest. So man's highest demand is for the divine design of his life. See this, my nobility? This is where you set your sights. And when we set our sights here, everything else is picked up along the way. He may not have the faintest conception of what it is, for there is possibly some marvelous talent hidden deep within him. His demand should be, Infinite Spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. Let the genius within me now be released. Let me see clearly the perfect plan. And this is an affirmation right here, my nobility. So you might want to take a screenshot of this and keep this on your phone to look at, because you can say this over and over to yourself. Infinite Spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. Let the genius within me now be released. Let me see clearly the perfect plan. The perfect plan includes health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. This is the square of life, which brings perfect happiness. When one has made this demand, he may find great changes taking place in his life, for nearly every man has wandered far from the divine design. I know in one woman's case, it was as though a cyclone had struck her affairs, but readjustments came quickly, and new and wonderful conditions took the place of old ones. See, so right there she's saying that by following the divine design of your life, that includes health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression, almost like, that sounds like H-Law, right? Health, love, awareness, and wealth. Perfect self-expression would be the awareness. In her case, even though the storms of life hit and her affairs had been struck like a cyclone, she made the readjustments, and they came quickly, and the new and wonderful conditions took place of the old ones. So you may be going through it, my nobility, but weather the storm, stay focused on God, and watch God rearrange life so it's even better for you. Perfect self-expression will never be labor, but of such absorbing interest that it will seem almost like play. The student knows also, as man comes into the world financed by God, the supply needed for his perfect self-expression will be at hand. Look at that, my nobility. The student knows also, as man comes into the world financed by God, the supply needed for his perfect self-expression will be at hand. Many a genius has struggled for years with the problem of supply when his spoken word and faith would have released quickly the necessary funds. For example, and this, pay attention, my nobility, if you needed some money, watch this. For example, after the class one day, a man came to me and handed me a cent. He said, "I have just 7 cents in the world, and I'm going to give you one. For I have faith in the power of your spoken word. I want you to speak the word for my perfect self-expression and prosperity." I spoke the word and did not see him again until a year later. He came in one day, successful and happy, with a roll of yellow bills in his pocket. He said, "Immediately after you spoke the word, I had a position offered me in a distant city and am now demonstrating health, happiness, and supply." A woman's perfect self-expression may be in becoming a perfect wife, a perfect mother, a perfect homemaker, and not necessarily in having a public career. The man definite leads, and the way will be made easy and successful. One should not visualize or force a mental picture. When he demands the divine design to come into his conscious mind, he will receive flashes of inspiration and begin to see himself making some great accomplishment. This is the picture or idea he must hold without wavering. The thing man seeks is seeking him. Read that again. The thing man seeks is seeking him. The telephone was seeking Bell. Parents should never force careers and professions upon their children. With the knowledge of spiritual truth, the divine plan could be spoken for early in childhood or prenatally. A prenatal treatment should be, now look at this, for if you have any babies on the way, look at this affirmation. Let the God in this child have perfect expression. Let the design of his mind, body, and affairs be made manifest throughout his life, throughout eternity. God's will be done, not man's. God's pattern, not man's pattern, is the command we find running through all the scriptures. And the Bible is a book dealing with the science of the mind. It is a book telling man how to release his soul or subconscious mind from bondage. The battles described are pictures of man waging war against mortal thoughts. A man's foes shall be those of his own household. Every man is Jehoshaphat, and every man is David, who slays Goliath, mortal thinking, with the little white stone, faith. So man must be careful that he is not the wicked and slothful servant who buried his talent. There is a terrible penalty to be paid for not using one's ability. Often fear stands between man and his perfect self-expression. Stage fright has hampered many a genius. This may be overcome by the spoken word or treatment. The individual then loses all self-consciousness and feels simply that he is a channel for infinite intelligence to express itself through. He is under direct inspiration, fearless and confident, for he feels that it is the Father within him who does the work. A young boy came often to my class with his mother. He asked me to speak the word for his coming examination at school. I told him to make the statement, "I am one with infinite intelligence. I know everything I should know on this subject." He had an excellent knowledge of history, but was not sure of his arithmetic. I saw him afterwards, and he said, "I spoke the word for my arithmetic and passed with the highest honors, but thought I could depend on myself for history," and he got a very poor mark. Now check this out. Pay attention here. Man often receives a setback when he is too sure of himself, which means he is trusting to his personality and not the Father within. Study, pay attention, be aware, be prepared. God will prepare you ahead of time. Another one of my students gave me an example of this. She took an extended trip abroad one summer, visiting many countries where she was ignorant of the languages. She was calling for guidance and protection every minute, and her affairs went smoothly and miraculously. Her luggage was never delayed nor lost. Accommodations were always ready for her at the best hotels, and she had perfect service wherever she went. She returned to New York. Knowing the language, she felt God was no longer necessary. She looked after her affairs in an ordinary manner. Everything went wrong. Her trunks delayed amid inharmony and confusion. The student must form the habit of practicing the presence of God. This is where I got it from, my nobility. Practicing the presence of God every minute. In all thy ways acknowledge him. Nothing is too small or too great. Sometimes an insignificant incident may be the turning point in a man's life. Robert Fulton, watching some boiling water simmering in a tea kettle, saw a steamboat. I have seen a student often keep back his demonstration through resistance or pointing the way. He pins his faith to one channel only and dictates just the way he desires the manifestation to come, which brings things to a standstill. My way, not your way, is the command of infinite intelligence. God is saying to you, my way, my nobility, not your way, my way. Don't think that God has to conform to your limited intelligence. God is infinite intelligence, able to deliver an infinite amount of ways, my nobility. Be in that flow. Be in the presence of God every moment of every hour of every minute. My way, not your way, is the command of infinite intelligence. Like all power, be it steam or electricity, it must have a non-resistant engine or instrument to work through, and man is the engine or instrument. Over and over again, man is told to stand still, O Judah, fear not. But tomorrow go out against them, for the Lord will be with you. You shall not need to fight this battle. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord is with you. We see this in the incidents of the $2,000 coming to the woman through the landlord when she became non-resistant and undisturbed. And the woman who won the man's love after all suffering had ceased. The student's goal is poise. Poise is power, for it gives God power a chance to rush through man, to will and to do its good pleasure. Stay poised, my nobility. Stay focused. Stay in the presence of God. Stay poised. Oh, yo, and my brothers out there, be unperturbable. Be poised. That is your masculine right, and your masculine birthright is to be poised and unperturbable. Poised, he thinks clearly and makes right decisions quickly. He never misses the trick. Anger blurs the visions, poisons the blood, is the root of many diseases, and causes wrong decision, leading to failure. It has been named one of the worst sins, as its reaction is so harmful. The student learns that in metaphysics, sin has a much broader meaning than in the old teaching. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. He finds that fear and worry are deadly sins. They are inverted faith, and through distorted mental pictures brings to pass the thing he fears. His work is to drive out those enemies from the subconscious mind. When man is fearless, he is finished. Maeterlinck said that man is God afraid. So as we read in the previous chapters, man can only vanquish fear by walking up to the thing he is afraid of. When Jehoshaphat and his army prepared to meet the enemy singing, "Praise the Lord, for his mercy endureth forever," they found their enemies had destroyed each other and there was nothing to fight. Yo, my nobility, let our enemies destroy each other. For example, a woman asked a friend to deliver a message to another friend. The woman feared to give the message, as the reasoning mind said, "Don't get mixed up in this affair. Don't give that message." She was troubled in spirit, for she had given her promise. At last, she determined to walk up to the lion and call on the law of divine protection. She met the friend to whom she was to deliver the message. She opened her mouth to speak it when her friend said, "So-and-so has just left town." This made it unnecessary to give the message, as the situation depended upon the person being in town. As she was willing to do it, she was not obligated to do it. As she did not fear, the situation vanished. See that? When you stand up to it, God will just take care of it for you. Get over the fear. Get over the fear. Fear is a false god. Fear is sin. Get over the fear. The student often delays his demonstration through a belief in incompletion. He should make the statement, "In divine mind, there is only completion. Therefore, my demonstration is completed. My perfect work, my perfect home, my perfect health, my perfect relationship. Whatever he demands are perfect ideas registered in divine mind and must manifest under grace in a perfect way." He gives thanks that he has already received on the invisible and makes active preparation for receiving on the visible. Look at that. Just give thanks for what is not, give thanks for the invisible, and then it will appear in the visible. One of my students was in need of a financial demonstration. She came to me and asked why it was not completed. I replied, "Perhaps you are in the habit of leaving things unfinished, and the subconscious has gotten into the habit of not completing. As the without, so the within." So what it's saying right here, my nobility, is she's saying, like, if you have some things in your life that haven't manifested, maybe there's some little projects or things in your life you need to complete. She said, "You are right. I often begin things and never finish them. I'll go home and finish something I commenced weeks ago, and I know it will be symbolic of my demonstration." So she sewed audaciously, and the article was soon completed. Shortly after, the money came in her most curious manner. Her husband was paid his salary twice that month. He told the people of their mistake, and they sent word to keep it. When man asks believing, he must receive, for God creates his own channels. I have been sometimes asked, suppose one has several talents. And this is hip-hop right here. Shout out to my hip-hoppers right here who know this and experience this. This is almost the closing of the reading here, but this is so important. I have been sometimes asked, suppose one has several talents. How is he to know which one to choose? Demand to be shown definitely. Say, if in his spirit, give me a definite lead. Reveal to me my perfect self-expression. Show me which talent I am to make use of now. I have known people to suddenly enter a new line of work and be fully equipped with little or no training. So make the statement, I am fully equipped for the divine plan of my life, and be fearless in grasping opportunities. Some people are cheerful givers, but bad receivers. See, this is important. This is the law of give and receive here, my nobility. Some people are cheerful givers, but bad receivers. They refuse gifts through pride or some negative reason, thereby blocking their channels, and invariably find themselves eventually with little or nothing. For example, a woman who had given away a great deal of money had a gift offered to her of several $1,000s. She refused to take it, saying she did not need it. Shortly after that, Her finances were tied up, and she found herself in debt for that amount. Man should receive gracefully the bread returning to him upon the water. Freely ye have given, freely ye shall receive. There is always the perfect balance of giving and receiving. And though man should give without thinking of returns, he violates law if he does not accept the returns which come to him. For all gifts are from God, man being merely a channel. A thought of lack should never be held over the giver. For example, when the man gave me the 1 cent, I did not say, "Poor man, he cannot afford to give me that." I saw him rich and prosperous, with his supply pouring in. It was this thought which brought it. If one has been a bad receiver, he must become a good one, and take even a postage stamp if it is given to him, and open up his channels for receiving. The Lord loveth a cheerful receiver as well as a cheerful giver. I have often been asked why one man is born rich and healthy and another poor and sick. Where there is an effect, there is always a cause. There is no such thing as chance. This question is answered through the law of reincarnation. Man goes through many births and deaths, and he knows the truth which sets him free. He is drawn back to the earth plane through unsatisfied desire to pay his karmic debts, or to fulfill his destiny. The man born rich and healthy has had pictured in his subconscious mind in his past life of health and riches, and the poor and sick man of disease and poverty. Man manifests on any plane the sum total of his subconscious beliefs. However, birth and death, this is where it gets, this is a hard one. This is a hard lesson. Well, look at it metaphysically. These are metaphysical lessons. However, birth and death are man-made laws. For the wages of sin is death. The Adamic fall in consciousness through the belief in two powers, the real man, spiritual man, is birthless and deathless. He never was born and he never dies. As he was in the beginning, he is now and ever shall be. So through the truth, man is set free from the law of karma, sin, and death, and manifests the man made in his image and likeness. Man's freedom comes through fulfilling his destiny, bringing into manifestation the divine design of his life. His Lord will say unto him, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Death itself, enter now into the joy of the Lord, eternal life." Eternal life, my nobility. Eternal life, God's presence. Eternal life. Death is a man-made law. How do you see when we leave this body? What do you call it? How do you define it? Are you hip to the hop of that? My spirit one day will hop out of this body. I'm in no rush. I like it here. I want to take my time here. I'm learning a great lesson here. My soul will be fulfilled when I leave this space. But eventually, I'll hop out of this body and hop into whatever the next body is or whatever the next event is. There's no fear here. Why? Because I know I'm eternal. I know I'm a being. There's no fear here. Why? Because you know you are eternal. Now, you can live in the illusion of fear and play that game of fear like watching a scary movie, right? But what an adventure this is. I like adventure movies. I don't like scary movies. Sometimes an adventure movie can get kind of scary, right? But I don't watch so-called scary movies. I don't like them. I like adventure movies, action adventure movies, you know? Because why? I relate to the action adventure movie. Why? Because my life is an action adventure. That's all I do is get in adventures. Last week was an adventure. This week's an adventure. Sometimes it's a spiritual and mental adventure. Sometimes it's the adventure of creating and writing a new album. Other times it's the adventure of running out and being on tour. Other times it's the adventure of bringing to life a new invention where thunder and lightning are knocking down trees and knocking the electricity out. It's all an adventure. And my life is an adventure, my nobility, for real. You know, I liked it in there. She was talking about David and Goliath. Goliath being mortal thinking, and David using the stone of faith to knock out mortal thinking. You know what's interesting about David and Goliath is David didn't play Goliath's game. When David came to fight Goliath, they wanted to put the armor. Like David was like, he carried the armor for Saul, the king. And when David, the king didn't even want to go fight Goliath. When David, this young 14-year-old boy or 12 or however old he was, said, I'll fight Goliath. Goliath was a giant, mortal thinking. I will destroy any man you put before me. So David said, I'll take him on, because David walked in faith. David had faith. David was God's chosen one at that time. So David, this is before he was King David. They tried to put the armor, Saul's armor on him. He said, I can't wear that armor. I can't fight with that armor. I'm refusing. Goliath is covered in armor. Goliath has a sword. Goliath is ready for war. But David goes out there with his shepherd clothes. Goes out there with his sling and his stone. And the Bible says he just stands right out of the spear range. He knows how far Goliath can throw that spear. And he knows that spear's not going to hit him. And he's just waiting. And he waits. And he takes his moment and whoom, he slings that rock and it hits Goliath. Boom! The faith knocks out the giant of mortal thinking, knocks Goliath out on the ground. Didn't play Goliath's game, played his game. Knocked Goliath out, picked up Goliath's giant sword and chopped off Goliath's head with his own sword. That's gangster right there. But David knew that God was with him. David felt the presence of God. David walked up and faced the giant in his life and didn't play the giant's game. He didn't carry a big heavy sword and armor and try and defeat Goliath where Goliath was strongest. No, David took that little sling and the stone. David took what he knew. David took his responsibility. David took his power. Knocked out Goliath, chopped his head off. Game over. David won the battle. David eventually became king. It's quite a powerful thing in our life because the adversary always looks so giant. It's always mortal thinking, though, that is the fear is involved in the mortal thinking. But when we're in God's presence and we walk in faith, it only takes something small to change the outcome. And others will witness that outcome and see the presence of God within you, and it will increase their faith in God as well. God willing, not everyone. Some people might get jealous, I don't know. But I will tell you this, when you live your life in God's presence, people will see that God's presence is with you. People will see the miracle of God on you. They may deny it, but they will see it. They may criticize it, but they will see it. And if they do see it on you and they do happen to ask you or look up to you, guide them right back to the light of God that is on them. Too many spiritual people want to, look at me, I'm so spiritual. And people, oh, you're so spiritual. No, that ain't the message. Now, I appreciate somebody who's spiritual, but every spiritual teacher, everyone I listen to who's worth anything in the spiritual world is always pointing me back to me. Bruce Lee pointed me back to me. Martin Luther King pointed me back to me. Jesus Christ pointed me back to me. KRS-One pointed me back to me. And what are they doing? They're pointing us back to God. The greatest teachers point you back to God, your ever-present spirit with God who is with you every present moment of the minute. Wholly integrated people have an omnipresent power. God is with you in this present moment. Never left, never went anywhere. It's only our ideas and our outdated thinking or conditioning or some form of hypnosis that keeps us from seeing God's ever-presence in our life. It's not easy. You think it was easy for David? That was difficult for David. I'll tell you, the most difficult thing for David was to see the cowards around him. And not that they were cowards, but they were in mortal thought. All of them, every one of them. You think David was the only kid or the only person of everyone who could take a sling and was a good shot with the slingshot? This is how they hunted birds. This is how they ate. They had to be good with the slingshot. It wasn't just David going around killing birds for the whole army because he was just such a good slingshot. No, they all knew how to use. They probably all had slingshots with them to hunt. But they didn't know the law like that. They didn't know God's law. They didn't know that, like, I don't have to fight Goliath's fight. That's why they were afraid of Goliath, because they thought they were going to have to fight Goliath's fight as Goliath fought. They thought they were going to have to get their heavy armor on and go up and have a sword fight and battle it out with a guy who's 12, 15 feet tall, who could just kick him over, swing his sword, and chop him in half. That's why they were afraid. And David had to see their fear and know that they didn't see and know the presence of God like he knew and saw the presence of God. And so what did he do? I will fight Goliath. And they let David fight Goliath. Imagine that. They saw the child, but something about the presence of God must have inspired them too. These are warriors. These are men. They're not going to send a child to do their warrior in battle. But no, there was something about David. The presence of God was on David. They saw the light of David, and they even allowed him to go forward because of what they had seen of David growing up. And David took that slingshot and knocked out the giant. There's a giant in your life, and it's just a thought. It may be a person, it may be a circumstance, it may be a thing, but it always starts with your thinking. See the giant for what it is, but it's just mortal thinking. And your fear is based on mortality, it's based on the idea and fear of death. Almost every fear people have is based on they're afraid to die. But that's mortal thinking. That's the man-made law, thinking that you can actually die. As an eternal being, David knows he's an eternal being. Therefore, he faced the mortal thinking, and he didn't think like other men. He thought like a God man. Think like the God man or the God woman that you are. Rise up, my nobility. Now is the time, and you are so empowered in God's presence everywhere. God is with us. God is here. God is great. And God is intimately interested in your purpose. Like, you have a purpose only you can fulfill. Nobody else. Zin can't do it. Martin Luther King can't do it. Bruce Lee can't do it. Nobody alive. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your kids. Nobody can fulfill the purpose that God designed and created for you. You have a great responsibility to God. And you watch this video, so you really got no excuses but to explore that and continue exploring it throughout the week, my nobility. You are empowered in health, love, awareness, and wealth, peace, and prosperity. And there it is. Hey!